The 1950s were a golden era for American automobiles. This was the age of chrome, tail fins, and powerful V8 engines. But not every car from this iconic decade was a hit. Today, we're diving into the weird, the wild, and the downright ridiculous. Let's take a look at the 13 worst and silliest American cars from the 1950s. Models that fell flat on their hubcaps, whether through odd designs, poor engineering, or a mix of both. The 1957 Dodge Royal Lancer was a prime example of mid-century American automotive design, known for its flamboyant appearance and bold use of chrome and tail fins. At first glance, the Royal Lancer had all the trappings of a car that would turn heads on the road. Its long, sweeping lines, exaggerated tail fins, and an abundance of chrome trim made it a striking figure on the highway, embodying the post-war optimism and futuristic design trends of the late 1950s. However, beneath this flashy exterior, the Royal Lancer had significant flaws that eventually undermined its appeal. One of the most talked about features of the 1957 Dodge Royal Lancer was its advanced push-button transmission system, a novelty at the time. Dodge promoted this feature as a futuristic innovation that would offer drivers more convenience and ease of use. Instead of the traditional gear shift lever, drivers would select gears by pushing buttons on the dashboard, giving the interior a modern, uncluttered look. However, in practice, this push-button transmission proved to be more of a headache than a breakthrough. Many owners reported frequent malfunctions with the system, particularly with the buttons becoming stuck or failing to engage properly. These mechanical issues were not only frustrating, but could also be dangerous, especially when drivers needed to change gears quickly or respond to road conditions. The push-button transmission became one of the Royal Lancer's most notorious weak points, detracting from its futuristic allure. In addition to the transmission problems, the 1957 Dodge Royal Lancer had a reputation for being mechanically unreliable in other areas as well. Engine troubles were common, with many owners experiencing issues with overheating and inconsistent performance. The car's suspension and steering systems were also criticized for being imprecise, making it harder to handle than its competitors. These mechanical shortcomings were particularly disappointing given the car's premium positioning in Dodge's lineup, where it was intended to compete with other high-end models of the era. Aesthetically, the Royal Lancer was a classic example of the more is more philosophy that dominated car design in the 1950s. Its towering tail fins, perhaps one of its most defining features, were intended to evoke a sense of speed and modernity inspired by the aviation and space exploration themes popular at the time. The tail fins were complemented by an abundance of chrome accents, which adorned everything from the grille to the side panels and bumpers. While some admired this over-the-top styling, others felt it was gaudy and excessive. The design seemed to lack cohesion, with too many competing elements vying for attention. Between the bold two-tone paint schemes, the ornate chrome detailing, and the exaggerated fins, the Royal Lancer's design felt cluttered and overdone. For many, it crossed the line from stylish to ostentatious, giving the impression that Dodge had thrown every design idea they could think of at the car without considering whether it all worked together harmoniously. The interior of the Royal Lancer also fell victim to the same excessive styling. While it featured plush materials and an array of dials and gauges, the dashboard's design, cluttered with buttons and chrome trim, mirrored the chaotic exterior. While it was intended to feel luxurious and modern, the effect was somewhat overwhelming. The dashboard layout, combined with the unreliable push-button transmission, made the driving experience more cumbersome than enjoyable. Despite these issues, the 1957 Dodge Royal Lancer is still remembered fondly by some car enthusiasts for its iconic design and representation of 1950s automotive culture. It remains a classic example of the era's obsession with futuristic, space-age aesthetics, and it stands as a reminder of the bold, sometimes overreaching, design choices made by American automakers during that time. However, its mechanical problems and over-the-top styling ultimately limited its long-term success, making it more of a historical curiosity than a lasting automotive icon. In summary, the 1957 Dodge Royal Lancer was a car that shone brightly but briefly. Its flashy design, complete with massive tail fins and chrome overload, made it a visual spectacle. But its mechanical issues, especially with the much-touted push-button transmission, tarnished its reputation. While it remains a fascinating piece of automotive history, the Royal Lancer's legacy is one of style over substance. A car that looked great in the showroom, but struggled to live up to its promises on the road. The 1950 Studebaker Champion, with its distinctive bullet nose design, was an ambitious attempt by Studebaker to stand out in the post-World War II automotive landscape. At a time when many cars were starting to embrace the futuristic jet age aesthetic, Studebaker took a bold leap by introducing a car with a front end that resembled the nose of an airplane or missile, complete with a large protruding chrome centerpiece. This daring design choice made the 1950 Champion one of the most recognizable cars of its era, but it also divided opinions sharply. While some appreciated the car's forward-thinking style, many found the design to be awkward and even laughable, cementing its place as one of the most polarizing cars of the 1950s. The bullet nose design was largely the work of famed industrial designer Raymond Loewy, who had worked with Studebaker for years and was known for his modernist approach to product design. The nose, which jutted out from the front of the car, was meant to evoke the streamlined appearance of airplanes and rockets, reflecting the excitement surrounding aviation and space exploration during the post-war period. The circular chrome feature in the center was supposed to resemble a propeller hub, adding to the aeronautical theme. While Loewy's vision was undeniably creative, many consumers simply couldn't warm to the unusual look. The bulbous front end seemed too extreme for the time, with some drivers feeling that it looked more like a mechanical experiment gone wrong than a refined car design. Critics of the Studebaker Champion often pointed out that the bullet nose design appeared unfinished, as if the designers had spent too much time focusing on the front of the car while neglecting the rest of it. The Champion's overall proportions were a bit unusual, with a narrow body that contrasted sharply with the wide and bulky front end. This imbalance made the car look somewhat ungainly, especially when viewed from the side. The rear of the car, by comparison, was much more conventional, lacking the visual interest of the front. For many, this created a sense of visual dissonance. The car seemed like two different vehicles fused together, neither of which fully harmonized with the other. One of the more significant drawbacks of the bullet nose design was its impact on the Champion's practicality. The oversized chrome bullet on the front grille, while eye-catching, did little to improve the car's aerodynamics or functionality. In fact, the design added weight to the front of the car and increased drag, which negatively affected the car's overall performance and fuel efficiency. For a car that was otherwise marketed as an economical and practical choice, these design flaws were hard to overlook. Many buyers were looking for dependable transportation in the early 1950s, and the Champion's eccentric styling and less-than-stellar performance didn't quite meet those needs. Despite these shortcomings, the Studebaker Champion wasn't without its merits. It was relatively affordable compared to other cars in its class, and it offered decent performance for its price point, especially with its six-cylinder engine. Studebaker also marketed the car as a symbol of modern innovation, with advertisements touting its futuristic design and advanced engineering. For a niche group of buyers, the Champion's bold styling and association with progress were enough to win them over. In this sense, the Champion became a cult classic, appreciated by those who admired Studebaker's willingness to take risks and break away from the more conservative designs of Detroit's Big Three automakers. However, the Champion's avant-garde look did more to alienate potential buyers than to attract them. While Studebaker hoped the bullet nose front end would make the car a design icon, it instead became the subject of ridicule. Many saw the Champion as too quirky, and the bullet nose became a source of jokes, with some comparing it to a spaceship or a household appliance. For buyers who preferred more traditional and elegant designs, the Champion was simply too much of an oddity to be taken seriously. This widespread mockery of the car's appearance hurt its sales and contributed to Studebaker's ongoing struggles in a highly competitive automotive market. In hindsight, the 1950 Studebaker Champion stands as a classic example of a car that was ahead of its time, but not in a good way. While its daring design was meant to push the boundaries of what a car could look like, it ended up pushing many buyers away instead. The Champion's unique styling was too far removed from the prevailing tastes of the time, and its lack of coherence in design made it feel disjointed and gimmicky. Over the years, the car has found a place in automotive history as a curiosity, a reminder of the risks involved in trying to predict future trends, and of how quickly a bold idea can turn into a punchline. The Buick Limited of the late 1950s was Buick's answer to the era's demand for excess, offering a car that exemplified the bigger is better mentality in both form and function. Released during a time when American automakers were engaged in a chrome-heavy arms race, the Limited took that concept to the extreme. The car was massive, over 227 inches in length, making it one of the largest production cars ever built by General Motors. Its imposing size, paired with copious amounts of chrome trim and gigantic tail fins, gave the Limited a presence on the road that was hard to ignore, but not always easy to appreciate. From a design standpoint, the 1958 Buick Limited looked as though it was built with the intention of being noticed from miles away. Every surface seemed to be drenched in chrome, from the massive front grille to the rear tail fins, which were as sharp and pronounced as anything on the market at the time. The front end was dominated by Buick's iconic toothy grille, which seemed to stretch endlessly across the car's wide frame. This grille was punctuated by dual headlights on either side, giving the Limited a kind of glitzy show car aesthetic that screamed excess in every sense of the word. The sides of the car were no less extravagant, with chrome accents that ran the length of the body, further emphasizing its massive proportions. These design elements culminated in the car's exaggerated tail fins, which were larger and more dramatic than almost anything else on the road, lending the Buick Limited an almost theatrical quality. However, the excessive design of the Buick Limited wasn't just about aesthetics. It also came with some significant drawbacks. For starters, the car's enormous size made it extremely difficult to handle. Weighing in at over 5,000 pounds, the Limited was a literal heavyweight, and its bulk made it challenging to maneuver in tight spaces or on winding roads. Parking was an ordeal, especially in urban settings, where its sheer length made finding a spot nearly impossible. The car's soft suspension, while offering a smooth ride on the straight highways, only added to the sense of wallowing instability when trying to corner or navigate sharp turns. Despite its V8 engine, which delivered around 300 horsepower, the Limited's heft meant that it never felt particularly quick or responsive. Acceleration was sluggish, and braking was also a concern, as the car's weight often overwhelmed its drum brakes, making it difficult to bring the Limited to a stop in a hurry. While the Buick Limited's powertrain was capable, its design was far more about style than substance. Buick had outfitted the car with the largest and most powerful engine in its lineup at the time, a 364 cubic inch V8. Yet all that power struggled to overcome the car's mass. The Limited's performance numbers paled in comparison to some of its more athletic competitors, making it clear that this car wasn't built for speed, but for cruising in comfort. The Limited was more at home gliding down wide, open highways than darting through the city streets. Unfortunately, the excessive weight also meant that fuel economy was abysmal, even by 1950s standards, with the Limited guzzling gas at an alarming rate. This wasn't a car for those concerned about practicality or efficiency. It was for those who wanted to make a statement. Inside, the Buick Limited was no less extravagant. The cabin was designed to match the car's exterior flamboyance, with plush seats upholstered in premium materials, chrome accents around the dashboard, and a level of luxury meant to rival the Cadillac offerings of the time. Buick wanted the Limited to be seen as a step up from its regular lineup, and the interior certainly reflected that ambition. It was spacious, offering ample room for passengers, but the oversized dimensions of the car meant that the interior felt more cavernous than cozy. The dashboard was adorned with an array of buttons, switches, and gauges, all framed in polished chrome, giving the driver a sense of operating something more akin to a spaceship than a traditional automobile. While Buick had high hopes for the Limited as a flagship model, its excessive design and impracticality quickly became its downfall. By 1958, the automotive industry was beginning to shift away from the gaudy excesses of the mid-1950s, as buyers started to favor more restrained, practical designs. The Limited, with its over-the-top styling, bloated dimensions, and less-than-stellar handling, began to feel out of step with the changing times. The economic downturn of the late 1950s also hurt sales, as consumers became more price-conscious and less willing to shell out extra money for chrome and tail fins. As a result, the Limited struggled to find buyers, and Buick discontinued the model after just 1 year of production. In retrospect, the Buick Limited has become something of an icon of the excesses of 1950s automotive design. The Packard Patrician was intended to embody the pinnacle of luxury for Packard in the 1950s, but it quickly became a symbol of the brand's fading glory. As the flagship sedan in Packard's lineup, it carried the weight of the company's storied reputation on its shoulders. Yet by the time the Patrician rolled off the assembly line in the early 50s, Packard was already losing ground to more dynamic and innovative competitors like Cadillac and Lincoln. Once considered the Rolls-Royce of America, Packard was now struggling to find its identity, and the Patrician, though elegant in its own right, reflected a brand that had fallen out of step with the times. The Patrician's design was indicative of Packard's increasingly conservative approach. While Cadillac was embracing bold, futuristic lines and Lincoln was experimenting with sleek, modern aesthetics, Packard seemed reluctant to push the envelope. The Patrician's styling, while dignified, was viewed as outdated by the standards of the early 1950s. Its large, boxy body, modest tail fins, and heavy chrome detailing harkened back to an earlier era of automotive design, but by then, consumers were looking for something more modern and exciting. The Patrician's conservative look might have appealed to traditionalists, but it did little to attract younger buyers or those seeking the cutting-edge luxury Cadillac and Lincoln were offering. Inside, the Packard Patrician remained true to its luxurious roots. The cabin was a testament to craftsmanship, with fine materials like wool upholstery, deep pile carpeting, and polished wood trim. Passengers were treated to a level of comfort that was on par with the best luxury sedans of the day. However, while the interior was plush and inviting, it lacked the technological innovations that were becoming increasingly important in the luxury market. Cadillac, for example, was introducing advanced features like automatic climate control and power seats, while Packard seemed to be resting on its laurels, offering luxury that felt more old-fashioned than cutting-edge. The Patrician's hefty weight also contributed to its less-than-stellar performance. Powered by a straight-8 engine, which Packard had been using since the 1930s, the car struggled to keep pace with the more powerful and efficient V8 engines offered by Cadillac and Lincoln. Although Packard's engine was smooth and reliable, it was underpowered for a car as large and heavy as the Patrician. The sluggish acceleration and cumbersome handling made the car feel more like a relic of the past than a modern luxury sedan. On the road, the Patrician was soft and floaty, offering a comfortable ride but sacrificing agility and responsiveness. This lack of performance further reinforced the impression that the Patrician, and by extension Packard, was being left behind by the competition. In addition to its underwhelming design and performance, Packard's reputation for quality was also beginning to suffer by the time the Patrician was introduced. During the late 1940s and early 1950s, Packard had made the controversial decision to introduce more affordable models like the Packard Clipper, which diluted the brand's image as a purveyor of premium luxury vehicles. While the Clipper helped Packard maintain sales volume, it also hurt the company's reputation for exclusivity and craftsmanship. By the time the Patrician was introduced as the brand's top-of-the-line sedan, many buyers were already questioning whether Packard still had what it took to compete with the likes of Cadillac and Lincoln. The Patrician, though elegant and well-appointed, couldn't shake the perception that Packard was no longer the leader it once was in the luxury car market. Packard's struggles weren't just limited to design and engineering. The company itself was facing significant financial difficulties during the 1950s. A failed merger with Studebaker in 1954, which was meant to strengthen both companies, only exacerbated the problems. Packard's resources were stretched thin, and the company's ability to invest in new technologies and designs was severely hampered. As a result, Cars like the Patrician were built with increasingly limited budgets, and it showed in the car's overall execution. While Cadillac and Lincoln were innovating with new features and designs, Packard was essentially treading water, relying on an aging design language and mechanical components that were becoming obsolete. The Packard Patrician's ultimate fate mirrored that of the company itself. Despite its luxurious appointments and stately presence, the Patrician couldn't overcome the perception that it was out of touch with the changing automotive landscape. As buyers flocked to more modern and innovative luxury sedans, Packard's sales continued to decline. By the mid-1950s, Packard was on the brink of collapse, and the Patrician, once the symbol of Packard's elegance and craftsmanship, the Cadillac El Dorado Brougham of 1957 was a marvel of its time, designed to push the boundaries of automotive luxury and showcase Cadillac's technological prowess. Built to be the ultimate symbol of wealth and status, this car came loaded with futuristic gadgets and innovations that seemed more suited to a spaceship than an automobile. It was Cadillac's answer to the growing competition in the luxury car market, and it aimed to prove that American engineering could rival and surpass the best Europe had to offer. Yet for all its ambition, the El Dorado Brougham would ultimately prove to be a double-edged sword. While it was undeniably luxurious and cutting-edge, its complexity and reliability issues made it an expensive nightmare for many owners. One of the El Dorado Brougham's most striking features was its stainless steel roof, a bold design choice that made the car stand out in any crowd. At a time when most cars had painted roofs, the Brougham's polished steel top gave it a futuristic, almost industrial look. This was in keeping with Cadillac's desire to create a car that felt ahead of its time. The stainless steel roof wasn't just for show either. It was meant to last longer and resist corrosion better than traditional materials. While it certainly added to the car's allure, it also contributed to its immense weight, which created its own set of problems. Another futuristic feature of the El Dorado Brougham was its air suspension system, which was designed to offer an ultra-smooth ride. Air suspension was still a relatively new technology in the automotive world, and Cadillac wanted to use it to elevate the driving experience. By replacing traditional coil springs with airbags that could be adjusted for height and firmness, Cadillac aimed to give the El Dorado Brougham a ride quality that was unlike anything else on the road. In theory, this system was supposed to provide a pillow, soft ride, absorbing bumps and imperfections with ease. However, in practice, the air suspension proved to be a major source of frustration for owners. The air suspension system on the El Dorado Brougham was notoriously unreliable. The complex network of compressors, air lines, and suspension bags was prone to failure, and when it did, the car's ride height and handling became erratic. Owners often found themselves struggling to maintain the system, which was expensive and difficult to repair. In some cases, the air suspension would fail entirely, leaving the car sagging awkwardly or riding at an uncomfortable height. For a car that cost more than a new house at the time, these problems were not only embarrassing, but also financially burdensome. Many owners eventually converted their cars back to traditional suspension systems, but by then, the damage to the Brougham's reputation had been done. Beyond the air suspension, the El Dorado Brougham was packed with an array of other technological innovations that were both exciting and problematic. The car came with automatic leveling, memory seats, power-operated everything, windows, locks, seats, and even the trunk, and a signal-seeking radio that could automatically find and lock on to the strongest radio station. It even had a vanity set in the rear armrest that included items like a compact, perfume, and a notebook, small details that added to the car's opulence. While these features made the Brougham feel like a rolling luxury suite, they also added to the car's complexity, making it more prone to breakdowns and electrical issues. The El Dorado Brougham's weight was another significant drawback. At over 5,000 pounds, it was one of the heaviest cars on the road, and while its powerful V8 engine provided plenty of torque, the car's bulk made it less than nimble. Steering was heavy, especially at low speeds, and the Brougham's size made it difficult to maneuver in tight spaces. Parking was a challenge, and the car's length made it feel unwieldy on narrow city streets. For all its luxury and cutting-edge features, the Brougham was simply a chore to drive in everyday conditions. Despite these issues, the Cadillac El Dorado Brougham was a car that made a bold statement. It was designed for a small elite group of buyers who wanted the very best, regardless of cost or practicality. With a price tag of around $13,000, equivalent to over $120,000 today, it was one of the most expensive cars of its time, and only a few hundred were built each year. Buyers included Hollywood stars, industrial magnates, and royalty, people for whom money was no object. Yet even these affluent buyers found themselves frustrated by the car's mechanical problems and maintenance costs. The high price of the El Dorado Brougham wasn't just due to its luxury features. It was also a reflection of the car's hand-built nature. Each Brougham was meticulously assembled with attention to detail, and Cadillac spared no expense in using the finest materials available. The Nash Metropolitan, introduced in the 1950s, was a bold attempt to bring a truly subcompact car to the American market at a time when bigger was undeniably better. Designed as a second car for suburban families, primarily aimed at women, it was an outlier in a sea of chrome-laden, tail-finned giants that defined the decade's automotive scene. Despite its quirky charm and distinctive look, the Metropolitan was met with mixed reviews, often viewed as impractical in a country where the ideal car was more about size, power, and presence. Measuring just over 12 feet long, the Nash Metropolitan was tiny by American standards. Its compact body was designed to be economical and easy to maneuver, making it ideal for city driving and quick errands. In a landscape dominated by the likes of Cadillac and Chrysler, with their extravagant designs and enormous proportions, the Metropolitan looked almost toy-like. Its cute, rounded lines and two-tone color schemes made it stand out, but not always for the right reasons. While its small size was meant to appeal to drivers who wanted something affordable and easy to park, it ended up being a mismatch for the broader American tastes of the time. Under the hood, the Nash Metropolitan wasn't much of a performer. Its tiny 1.2 to 1.5-liter engine, producing around 42 horsepower, struggled to deliver the kind of power that American drivers were accustomed to. Acceleration was slow, and with a top speed of about 70 miles per hour, it wasn't built for highways. In an era where muscle cars and large V8 engines were becoming the norm, the Metropolitan's modest performance was seen as lackluster. It was fine for short city drives, which was exactly what it was intended for, but for longer road trips or faster-paced driving, it left much to be desired. Inside, the Nash Metropolitan was cramped. While its interior was cleverly designed to make the most of its limited space, it still felt tight, especially for larger passengers. There wasn't much in the way of luxury or convenience features, which, while understandable given its role as a budget-friendly car, made it less appealing compared to the more spacious and comfortable sedans of the time. The back seat was especially small, making it difficult for families or groups of more than two to use the car for anything beyond short commutes. Despite its drawbacks, the Nash Metropolitan wasn't without its charms. It had a certain whimsical quality that endeared it to a niche group of drivers. Its compact size made it easy to park in crowded cities, and its unique design turned heads. The car's diminutive proportions and retro styling gave it a playful, almost European flair, which appealed to some drivers who were looking for something different. But in the United States, where bigger often meant better, it was more of a novelty than a serious contender in the market. The timing of the Nash Metropolitan was both a blessing and a curse. In the years following World War II, there was a growing market for smaller, more fuel-efficient cars, especially in Europe, where compact vehicles like the Volkswagen Beetle were taking off. However, in the US, the post-war boom had led to a demand for larger, more luxurious cars. Families wanted space, power, and status, qualities that the Metropolitan simply didn't provide. While it sold reasonably well for a niche vehicle, it never achieved the kind of widespread success that Nash had hoped for. By the early 1960s, the Nash Metropolitan had been phased out, and its place in the American automotive landscape was more of a footnote than a headline. It was a quirky experiment that didn't quite fit into the mainstream market, a car that offered something different but was ultimately out of step with the prevailing trends of its time. Today, the Nash Metropolitan is a beloved classic among collectors who appreciate its unique styling and compact charm. But when it first hit the roads, it was a curious misfit in a decade where bigger, bolder cars ruled the highways. The Kaiser Dragon was introduced in the early 1950s as a bold attempt to compete in the luxury car market. On paper, it had all the elements of a high-end vehicle: advanced features, a premium price tag, and a name meant to evoke images of exotic luxury. But in reality, the Dragon's design was more of a head-scratcher than a head-turner. Instead of exuding sophistication, it came off as tacky and overdone, with bizarre design choices that made it seem more like a parody of luxury than the real thing. One of the most notorious features of the Kaiser Dragon was its use of fake bamboo trim on the interior. This odd choice gave the car a faux tropical look that clashed with the rest of the vehicle's design. It was as if someone decided to blend the aesthetics of a 1950s tiki bar with a car interior, and the result was far from elegant. While the bamboo was supposed to make the car feel exotic, it only added to the sense that the designers were trying too hard to be different. Instead of refinement, it felt gimmicky and out of place. The interior fabrics were another area where the Kaiser Dragon went off the rails. The seats and door panels were upholstered in a material called dragon skin, a vinyl fabric with a reptilian pattern that was supposed to add a sense of opulence and uniqueness. Unfortunately, it only contributed to the car's overall sense of excess and poor taste. Combined with gold accents scattered throughout the interior, the design elements made the Dragon feel more like a theme park attraction than a luxury car. It was gaudy, loud, and lacking in the subtlety that true luxury cars of the era, like Cadillacs or Lincolns, were known for. The exterior of the Kaiser Dragon wasn't much better. While the overall shape of the car was sleek and aerodynamic for the time, the paint options often featured gold hues that added to the car's overly flashy appearance. The designers seemed to have confused opulence with an overabundance of gold and other showy details, making the Dragon look more garish than glamorous. It was a classic case of trying too hard to stand out in a crowded market and missing the mark entirely. Mechanically, the Kaiser Dragon wasn't bad, but it also wasn't remarkable. It featured a 226 cubic inch inline-six engine, which was reliable but didn't offer the kind of power or performance one would expect from a luxury vehicle. While the Dragon had some advanced features for its time, such as a padded dashboard and a well-insulated ride, these practical attributes were overshadowed by the bizarre styling choices that made the car difficult to take seriously. Kaiser, a relatively small automaker compared to the giants like General Motors, had been known for innovation in the early post-war years. However, by the time the Dragon was introduced, the company was struggling to maintain its foothold in the competitive auto market. The Dragon was supposed to help Kaiser stand out, offering something unique in the luxury segment. But instead, it became a symbol of the company's inability to understand what high-end buyers actually wanted. The Dragon's biggest problem was that it didn't know what it wanted to be. It was neither a classic luxury car with understated elegance, nor a bold, futuristic vehicle pushing the boundaries of automotive design. Instead, it was a mishmash of ill-conceived ideas, wrapped in an outlandish package that didn't appeal to the market it was targeting. Buyers who were looking for true luxury were turned off by the Dragon's flamboyant design, while those who might have appreciated its quirks were unlikely to spend luxury-level money on such an oddball vehicle. As a result, the Kaiser Dragon was a commercial flop. It failed to capture the imagination of the public, and only a limited number were ever produced, making it a rarity today. However, its scarcity hasn't translated into desirability among collectors, in the same way that other rare cars from the era have. While the Dragon's unusual design choices make it an interesting piece of automotive history, it's more of a curiosity than a prized possession. In hindsight, the Kaiser Dragon is often remembered as a car that tried to break the mold, but ended up looking like a design experiment gone wrong. Its over-the-top features, like the fake bamboo and dragon skin upholstery, make it one of the most peculiar vehicles of its time. Rather than setting a new standard for luxury, the Dragon became an example of how not to design a high-end car, with its gaudiness overshadowing any positive attributes it may have had. Today, it stands as a cautionary tale about the dangers of over-designing in the pursuit of being different. The 1958 Plymouth Fury is a quintessential example of the tailfin fever that swept through the American automotive industry in the late 1950s. Designed during an era when cars were getting bigger, flashier, and more futuristic by the year, the Fury was Plymouth's bold entry into the performance and style market. Its most striking feature, the towering tail fins, gave it the appearance of a rocket ship straight out of a science fiction movie, as though it was poised to take flight at any moment. These dramatic fins weren't just decorative. They embodied the era's obsession with the future, space exploration, and the sleek lines of jet planes. But despite its attention-grabbing design, the Fury was plagued by a range of issues that would ultimately undermine its legacy. The styling of the 1958 Fury was certainly its defining trait. The towering tail fins, which extended dramatically from the rear, were coupled with a wide, aggressive front grille and a low, long body that gave the car an imposing stance. Its large, chrome-laden bumpers and intricate details screamed excess, which was exactly what the post-war automotive market seemed to crave at the time. The Fury's design played heavily on the jet age influences, with designers drawing inspiration from the futuristic ideals that were popular in the 1950s, emphasizing speed, power, and modernity. However, beneath its dazzling exterior, the 1958 Plymouth Fury suffered from numerous mechanical issues that marred its reputation. One of the primary concerns was its build quality. Like many American cars of the era, the Fury was produced at a time when automakers were more focused on aesthetics than long-term durability. As a result, many owners found themselves dealing with rust problems, misaligned panels, and overall subpar craftsmanship that led to frequent breakdowns. While the car was designed to look futuristic and fast, its performance was often inconsistent, leaving some buyers disappointed. The Fury was equipped with a powerful V8 engine capable of delivering respectable performance on the road, at least on paper. But in practice, the car's mechanical reliability was a major issue. The push-button transmission, a novelty feature that added to the Fury's futuristic appeal, was prone to malfunction. Owners reported frequent problems with the transmission not engaging properly, and the complexity of the system made repairs difficult and expensive. These issues weren't unique to the Fury, but they stood out because the car's bold appearance had set such high expectations. Another problem was the car's handling. The Fury's massive size and heavy weight made it difficult to maneuver, particularly at higher speeds. While it was marketed as a performance car, it was not as nimble or responsive as its sportier competitors. Its suspension system, though advanced for its time, struggled to balance the car's weight, leading to a less than smooth ride. The Fury's impressive straight-line speed didn't translate well to real-world driving conditions, where cornering and stopping were more important than how fast it could go in a straight line. Despite its mechanical flaws, the Fury's aesthetics made it an icon of the late 1950s. Its tail fins, in particular, have become one of the most recognizable features of classic American cars from this era. These fins weren't just for show, they were a statement, a visual metaphor for the optimism and excitement of the time. Cars like the Fury were designed to capture the public's imagination, to stand out in a sea of more traditional designs. And in that sense, the Fury was a success. The car even gained a certain level of pop culture immortality thanks to Stephen King's novel Christine, in which a 1958 Plymouth Fury plays the role of a supernatural, evil car with a mind of its own. In Christine, the Fury's exaggerated design and ominous appearance became part of its menacing persona, and this association has helped solidify the car's place in automotive history, despite its many flaws. In hindsight, the 1958 Plymouth Fury is often remembered more for its outlandish styling than for its performance or reliability. While it captured the spirit of the 1950s with its jet-age design cues and over-the-top tail fins, the car's poor build quality and mechanical issues tarnished its legacy. Today, it stands as a symbol of an era when form often took precedence over function in American car design, and it remains a sought-after collectible for classic car enthusiasts, if only for its striking looks. Ultimately, the Fury's fate serves as a reminder of how the pursuit of style and novelty can sometimes overshadow practicality. Its towering tail fins may have made it look like a rocket ship ready to take off, but under the hood, it was a car bogged down by the same problems that plagued many of its contemporaries: mechanical unreliability, poor craftsmanship, and a design that didn't always translate to a smooth driving experience. The Henry J, produced by Kaiser Motors in the early 1950s, was a bold attempt to enter the economy car market, but it quickly became an example of how cutting corners can backfire in the automotive industry. Designed to be an affordable, no-frills vehicle for the post-World War II era, the Henry J was intended to offer basic transportation to Americans at a time when car ownership was on the rise. However, what was supposed to be a simple, budget-friendly compact car ended up feeling incomplete, cheaply made, and underpowered, leaving many buyers unimpressed and ensuring its place among automotive missteps. One of the key selling points of the Henry J was its low price. Kaiser Motors aimed to sell the car for less than $1,300, which was an ambitious goal considering the competition from more established manufacturers like Ford and Chevrolet. To achieve this, the car was designed with a number of cost-saving measures that significantly impacted its overall quality and practicality. For example, in a bid to reduce manufacturing costs, the Henry J famously lacked a trunk lid. This meant that to access the car's trunk space, drivers had to fold down the rear seats and crawl into the back. While this might have been excusable in a smaller, sportier vehicle, it was a serious inconvenience for buyers who expected the basic functionality of a trunk in their everyday car. The cost-cutting didn't stop there. The interior of the Henry J was as sparse as it could get, with little in the way of creature comforts or style. The upholstery was cheap, the dashboard was minimalistic to the point of being boring, and there were no options for things like a radio or even armrests. While this stripped-down approach was meant to appeal to budget-conscious consumers, it left many feeling like they were getting much less than what they paid for. Compared to other cars in its price range, the Henry J came across as underwhelming and uncomfortable, with a cabin that seemed more suited to an economy model from a decade earlier than a modern car for the 1950s. Performance-wise, the Henry J didn't fare much better. It was powered by either a 4-cylinder or a 6-cylinder engine, neither of which offered much in terms of speed or power. The 4-cylinder engine, in particular, was criticized for being underpowered, with sluggish acceleration and a top speed that left much to be desired. This lack of performance was a major drawback, especially in a post-war era when American consumers were increasingly looking for cars that could keep up with the demands of modern driving. The Henry J's fuel economy was one of its few redeeming qualities, but it wasn't enough to offset the car's overall lack of excitement or functionality on the road. The Henry J's exterior design didn't do much to endear it to the public either. While it wasn't necessarily ugly, the car's styling was plain and uninspired. It lacked the sleek lines or bold design features that other cars of the 1950s were known for, making it easy to overlook on the road. Its small, rounded body gave it a somewhat frumpy appearance, and there were few options for customization or trim upgrades. In a decade known for its flashy, chromed-out cars with towering tail fins and gleaming grills, the Henry J looked more like an awkward holdover from the pre-war years than a modern compact ready for the future. Another major problem was that the Henry J wasn't all that much cheaper than its competitors once buyers factored in optional features and upgrades. For only a little more money, they could purchase a more reliable, better-equipped car from a more established brand. As a result, the Henry J often felt like a compromise, and many buyers weren't willing to make that trade-off. The car's initial appeal as a budget option quickly faded when consumers realized they weren't getting as much value for their money as they might have hoped. Kaiser Motors had high hopes for the Henry J, even partnering with Sears to sell a version of the car under the Allstate brand in an attempt to widen its market. However, even this effort wasn't enough to save the Henry J from its fate. The car's poor reception, combined with stiff competition from other manufacturers who could offer more car for the money, led to sluggish sales, and production of the Henry J was discontinued after only a few years. In hindsight, the Henry J is remembered as a well-intentioned but deeply flawed car. While it was supposed to be a solution for post-war families looking for affordable transportation, its extreme cost-cutting measures ultimately made it feel incomplete and impractical. Without key features like a trunk lid, a comfortable interior, or even halfway decent performance, the Henry J failed to meet the needs and expectations of American consumers. Today, it stands as a reminder that affordability alone isn't enough to guarantee success in the automotive world. Cars need to offer a balance of quality. By the mid-1950s, the Hudson Hornet, once a symbol of American automotive innovation and performance, had seen its reputation wane significantly. The 1955 model, intended to meld luxury with performance, fell short of expectations in multiple ways. Despite Hudson's ambition to remain a prominent player in the competitive automotive landscape, the Hornet began to show signs of aging and obsolescence compared to its rivals. The 1955 Hudson Hornet's design attempted to convey luxury and grandeur, but the result was a vehicle that felt bulky and cumbersome. The car's oversized dimensions were meant to signal opulence, yet they instead made the Hornet feel unwieldy and less agile. The car's proportions, with its expansive body and relatively short wheelbase, contributed to a driving experience that many found uncomfortable and less responsive. This design choice, intended to enhance the vehicle's presence on the road, ended up making it difficult to maneuver, particularly in urban settings where its size became a hindrance. Under the hood, the Hornet's performance was equally disappointing. Hudson had previously built a reputation on engineering high-performance engines, but the 1955 model's powertrain did not live up to this legacy. While the Hornet's engine was competent and reliable, it lacked the vigor and refinement that consumers had come to expect from newer competitors. The car's performance felt subdued, and its acceleration and handling were overshadowed by more advanced and powerful engines being introduced by other manufacturers. This deficiency in performance made the Hornet seem outdated and less exciting compared to the rapidly evolving automotive market. The interior of the 1955 Hudson Hornet also fell short of the luxurious aspirations it aimed to fulfill. Although efforts were made to enhance the cabin with upscale features, the result was a space that felt underwhelming. The materials used and the overall design did not reflect the same level of sophistication and comfort that was becoming standard in the luxury car segment of the 1950s. The interior's layout and finish were criticized for lacking the attention to detail and quality that characterized the more successful luxury vehicles of the era. This lack of refinement contributed to the Hornet's struggle to present itself as a true luxury car. Innovation, which had been a hallmark of earlier Hornet models, was noticeably absent in the 1955 version. The Hornet's previous successes had been driven by its forward-thinking engineering and pioneering features. However, by the mid-1950s, the automotive industry had moved forward with new technologies and design trends. The 1955 Hornet, by contrast, felt like a step backward. Its features were outdated, and it failed to incorporate the latest advancements that were becoming increasingly popular among consumers. This lack of innovation made the Hornet seem like a relic of an earlier era, struggling to keep pace with the rapid technological progress of the time. The culmination of these factors, the bulky design, underwhelming performance, uninspired interior, and lack of innovation, resulted in the 1955 Hudson Hornet's decline in market appeal. Once celebrated as a leader in American automotive excellence, the Hornet became a symbol of how quickly a car model could fall out of favor. It represented a bygone era of Hudson's dominance, now overshadowed by competitors who had embraced the changing demands of the automotive market. In summary, the 1955 Hudson Hornet serves as a poignant example of a vehicle that failed to adapt to the evolving automotive landscape of the mid-1950s. Despite its historical significance and the high expectations placed upon it, the Hornet's inability to innovate and address the changing preferences of consumers led to its decline. It highlights the challenges faced by automotive manufacturers in maintaining relevance and competitive edge as the industry continued to advance. The 1957 Rambler Rebel was an ambitious attempt by American Motors Corporation, AMC, to break into the performance car market during an era when muscle and speed were becoming increasingly popular. It was introduced as a high-performance version of the Rambler, aimed at competing with bigger names in the industry like Ford, Chevrolet, and Chrysler, all of whom had carved out a significant niche with their own V8-powered models. However, despite its potential on paper, the Rambler Rebel failed to live up to its marketing promise, becoming a car overshadowed by its own limitations. One of the major selling points of the 1957 Rebel was its V8 engine, a significant upgrade from the straight six engines typically found in smaller Ramblers. The engine boasted 255 horsepower, which was impressive for a car of its size and weight at the time. In fact, AMC claimed that the Rebel could go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just over 7 seconds, making it one of the quickest American cars of its day, at least in theory. However, these performance numbers were often difficult to replicate in real-world driving conditions due to several shortcomings. One of the primary issues with the Rambler Rebel was its weight. Though it was smaller than most of the full-size cars on the road, it was still relatively heavy for a performance vehicle. The added weight not only dulled its acceleration, but also affected handling and agility, two key elements in creating a truly exciting driving experience. Despite its powerful V8 engine, the Rebel often felt sluggish when pushed to its limits, and its handling could be best described as cumbersome compared to other sportier, lighter performance cars on the market. While AMC tried to position the Rebel as a high-performance muscle car, its weight undermined its ability to deliver on that promise. Compounding the issue of performance was the Rebel's conservative design. In the late 1950s, American car culture was undergoing a transformation, with consumers increasingly drawn to vehicles that made bold statements in terms of both power and appearance. Companies like Ford, Chevrolet, and Chrysler were rolling out models with aggressive, eye-catching designs, cars that looked fast and sleek even when parked. In contrast, the Rambler Rebel's design was decidedly understated, with its boxy shape, modest chrome accents, and rather plain overall appearance. The Rebel didn't look the part of a muscle car. It lacked the sharp lines, exaggerated fins, and visual flair that were hallmarks of the era's most popular performance vehicles. While the Rebel's design may have appealed to those looking for something less ostentatious, it didn't resonate with performance car enthusiasts who wanted a car that not only drove fast but looked fast. This disconnect between the Rebel's understated styling and its intended purpose as a high-performance vehicle further contributed to its struggles in the market. At a time when style was becoming as important as substance, the Rambler Rebel's design felt more suited to a family car than a road-going powerhouse. Another critical issue with the 1957 Rambler Rebel was that, despite its positioning as a high-performance vehicle, it didn't handle like one. The car's suspension and chassis were built for comfort rather than speed, meaning that while it might have been able to reach impressive speeds in a straight line, it struggled when cornering or taking on more challenging road conditions. The suspension was too soft, resulting in significant body roll during turns, and the steering lacked the precision needed for a car of its supposed performance pedigree. The combination of these factors meant that the driving experience wasn't nearly as exhilarating as consumers were led to believe. It felt more like a standard sedan that happened to have a V8 under the hood rather than a true performance car. Additionally, the marketing for the Rebel didn't align with its actual capabilities. AMC heavily promoted the Rebel as a competitor to the more powerful muscle cars of the time, focusing on its V8 engine and acceleration potential. However, the reality of driving the car revealed that its performance didn't match up to these lofty claims. Enthusiasts expecting a rival to the Chevy Bel Air or Ford Fairlane 500 were instead met with a car that was more about practicality than pure performance. This mismatch between marketing and reality hurt the Rebel's reputation, as it failed to meet the expectations set by its advertising. Moreover, the Rambler Rebel suffered from being part of a brand that was traditionally associated with economy and practicality rather than power and speed. AMC had built its reputation on producing smaller, more efficient cars that appealed to budget-conscious buyers, and the Rebel, despite its performance focus, couldn't entirely shake off that association. Consumers were more likely to look to brands like Ford and Chevrolet for performance vehicles. The Crosley Hot Shot, introduced in 1949, was a quirky attempt to offer a lightweight, sporty vehicle during a time when bigger and more powerful cars were dominating American roads. Designed to be a compact, affordable sports car, the Hot Shot was one of the smallest and lightest cars of its era, tipping the scales at just over 1,100 pounds. On paper, it seemed like a fun, economical alternative to the gas-guzzling sedans of the 1950s. However, in practice, the Hot Shot fell far short of expectations, struggling in almost every aspect that matters in a car. Its tiny 26-horsepower engine, bare-bones design, and lack of creature comforts turned it from a promising little car into a novelty that was difficult to take seriously. One of the most glaring shortcomings of the Crosley Hot Shot was its minuscule engine. At just 724 cubic centimeters and producing a mere 26 horsepower, the engine was woefully underpowered, even for a car as small as the Hot Shot. The vehicle's top speed was barely over 60 miles per hour, and reaching that speed required a fair amount of patience. Acceleration was painfully slow, making the car feel underwhelming and impractical for anything other than leisurely drives. While the Hot Shot's creators may have envisioned it as a sporty roadster, its performance couldn't keep up with the average car of its time, let alone the true sports cars of the day. The Hot Shot's design further compounded its problems. While its small size was supposed to be an advantage in terms of fuel efficiency and handling, it ended up being more of a disadvantage. The car's bare-bones, stripped-down appearance lacked the sophistication or elegance that buyers wanted in a sports car. The design featured little in the way of style or comfort. There were no doors, the interior was Spartan at best, and the build quality left much to be desired. The car was simple, but to a fault, offering nothing to counterbalance its lack of power. The Hot Shot's minimalism may have worked as a gimmick, but as a practical vehicle, it left drivers feeling shortchanged. Moreover, while the Crosley Hot Shot was marketed as a sporty roadster, it didn't deliver the fun driving experience one would expect from a car of that type. Its lightweight did help it maneuver more easily, but the overall driving experience was still underwhelming due to the car's limited power and handling capabilities. The Hot Shot suspension wasn't particularly well tuned, leading to a rough ride on anything other than perfectly smooth roads. Combined with its lack of power, the driving experience felt more like a chore than a thrill, which is a fatal flaw for any car that claims to be sporty. The Hot Shot did have a few redeeming qualities, but these were more curiosities than true advantages. For instance, it was one of the first American cars to use disc brakes, which were far superior to the drum brakes common at the time. Additionally, its compact size made it easy to park and maneuver in tight spaces, which was a genuine advantage in crowded urban environments. However, these small benefits couldn't make up for the car's lackluster performance and uncomfortable ride. In the end, the Crosley Hot Shot was more of a novelty item than a serious contender in the automotive market. Its small size and low price tag may have drawn some buyers, but it lacked the essential elements of a successful vehicle: power, comfort, and style. While it may have carved out a niche as an affordable alternative for a select few, it never captured the broader market's attention and failed to live up to its sporty aspirations. The Hot Shot's underpowered engine and Spartan design made it feel like more of a gimmick than a genuine car, cementing its place as one of the more forgettable and underwhelming vehicles of the 1950s. The 1958 Ford Edsel is the poster child of automotive failures, remembered as one of the most colossal flops in car history. Its downfall wasn't just due to a single mistake. It was the result of a perfect storm of poor design choices, bad timing, and misjudged marketing strategies. Ford had heavily promoted the Edsel as a revolutionary vehicle that would change the way Americans thought about cars, touting it as the future of automotive design. By the time it hit the market, however, the Edsel was nothing short of a disaster, and its failure left a lasting stain on the industry. One of the most glaring missteps was the Edsel's design, particularly its infamous horse collar grille, which immediately turned off potential buyers. The grille was intended to make the Edsel stand out from other cars, but instead it became a symbol of everything wrong with the vehicle. Many people thought the grille looked awkward and out of place, and its oval shape earned it derisive comparisons to everything from a toilet seat to a horse's mouth. While Ford wanted the Edsel to appear bold and forward-thinking, the grille gave it a face that only a marketer could love, and it was almost universally disliked by the public. Beyond its bizarre design, the Edsel was overstyled in nearly every way. The car had an excess of chrome and ornamentation, from intricate tail fins to flashy badges and trim, that gave it a gaudy, overly complex look. Rather than sleek and futuristic, the Edsel looked bloated and overworked, trying too hard to be everything to everyone. In an era where design trends were shifting toward clean lines and simplicity, the Edsel's over-the-top styling clashed with the emerging preferences of the late 1950s consumer. Mechanically, the Edsel was riddled with problems as well. Ford had promised cutting-edge technology and innovation with the Edsel, but many of the car's advanced features didn't live up to expectations. One of the more famous missteps was the Teletouch transmission, a push-button system mounted in the center of the steering wheel. While it was supposed to be futuristic and convenient, it often malfunctioned, confusing drivers and causing serious mechanical headaches. Quality control issues also plagued the Edsel. Many vehicles rolled off the assembly line with misaligned parts, faulty wiring, or other defects, further souring its reputation. The Edsel's timing couldn't have been worse. Ford launched the car in the late 1950s, a period when the U.S. economy was experiencing a downturn and consumers were tightening their belts. Buyers were looking for smaller, more economical vehicles. But the Edsel was a large, fuel-thirsty car with a premium price tag. It was aimed at an upper-middle-class market that simply wasn't there anymore. At a time when families wanted affordable, reliable transportation, the Edsel represented everything they didn't need: flashy, expensive, and impractical. The marketing strategy behind the Edsel was another significant misfire. Ford had hyped the car to extreme levels before its release, shrouding it in mystery and building up massive public anticipation. Advertisements painted the Edsel as the car that would define the future of driving, setting expectations astronomically high. When the car finally debuted, it failed to deliver on any of those promises, leaving consumers disappointed and confused. The gap between what was promised and what was delivered was too wide to bridge, and the backlash was swift and brutal. In its first year, sales of the Edsel were dismal. Ford had hoped to sell 200,000 units but barely managed to move 64,000. The writing was already on the wall, and by 1960, Ford discontinued the Edsel entirely. What was meant to be a revolutionary car became one of the most embarrassing chapters in automotive history, a symbol of corporate hubris and misjudgment. The Edsel's failure wasn't just a financial disaster for Ford, it also became a cultural punchline. Over the years, the name Edsel has become synonymous with failure, and its legend as the ultimate car flop has only grown. While some car collectors today appreciate the Edsel for its uniqueness and historical significance, it remains a cautionary tale of what happens when hype, poor design, and bad timing collide. Even more than 60 years after its release, the Edsel stands as a stark reminder that even the most ambitious ideas can fall flat when they don't connect with the needs and desires of the public. And there you have it, the 13 worst and silliest American cars from the 1950s. While the decade gave us some incredible machines, these models prove that not every car from the 50s was a classic. From design disasters to mechanical nightmares, these cars are a reminder that even in the golden age of American automobiles, mistakes were made. Let us know in the comments which car you think is the worst. And don't forget to subscribe for more automotive history and fun.